let me bring the panelists out. I'm going to ask Michelle and George and Steve to come on out here, come meet the Philadelphia crowd. You know, when you do these things, you know, you get your good script. And I have heard of all these people, and I know some of them really well. And I'm not going to read any bio of any of them. So what I've asked them to do is to talk a little bit personally. You know, because in Philadelphia, we don't care so much what you know. We need to know that you care. Let's start there. So I'm going to ask them to talk personally, take a couple of minutes and talk personally about what brings you to this point. And after you tell us that, then tell us what it is that people are saying about you that you want to correct right up front. Steve, I'm going to start with you. And notice I didn't call you Dr. Perry, because I call you that, I'll be setting you up. So we're not going to do that. This is going to be Steve, Michelle, and George. Is that okay?
Whatever.
All right, go.
Thank you so much. What brings me here is the fact that I have seen what education can do to change people's lives. I've seen how it can help a person see who they are and change the direction of their destiny. It can make a person believe in themselves when no one else did. It can make a person feel valuable in a place where they never felt valued. I've had the opportunity to experience how education can change lives, not just as a person whose life has changed, but as a person who uses it to change other people's lives. I feel honored to be a principal and to be invited into the educational experience of our 700 children. I feel like coming back to Philly is exciting for me. The first school I got the chance to work in was Strawberry Mansion, where I saw firsthand how beautiful, bright kids can be sent to a school that doesn't work and see what happens to their self-esteem. I saw how people got the opportunity to keep their jobs while these children didn't get a chance to earn the opportunity to have the careers that their intellect should have given them. I got the chance to sit down with a 14-year-old who couldn't read a stop sign. And I know that because I thought I was so smart, I took the word stop and wrote it on a piece of paper in an attempt to try and convince him that he really did know how to read. And as he stuttered through the word stop, I realized, wow, he didn't do this to himself. So coming here to have this conversation is about being honest about what education can and doesn't do, and get to the point where we're talking about solutions. The controversial things I say, or I'm accused of saying, the first is that I've called all teachers roaches. Let me tell you what I did say, because you can listen to it on NPR, Minnesota Public Radio. And what I said at 11 minutes into the speech was, I am sick and tired of people using our children for their careers. I am tired of them having the opportunity to live the lifestyles that they want, but not giving our children the opportunities that they deserve. And so we're going to turn the lights on and shine the light on the roaches, whoever they may be. I'm most specifically, though, talking about the individuals who are union bosses, who use their position to create contracts that make it harder and harder for us to get rid of ineffective educators. See, I'm never going to back down from what I said. I said what I said. But was I talking about teachers? No. I was talking about the bosses who make it possible for these contracts to make it harder and harder for us to get rid of people who are not doing their job. That's the first thing I say that's most controversial. The other thing I say that I think that stuns me, that people find it controversial, is I don't believe that poverty has an impact on a child's ability to learn. Because if that's the case, then we may as well shut down all the schools in North Philly, because there are a bunch of poor kids here. And I don't think that's the case. I think that we can create schools in some of the poorest communities and compel children to learn by loving them, by showing them that every single day that they are valuable, making them feel like you're the reason that they woke up today. That you can breathe life into their dreams by simply inviting them into your classroom and introducing them to the subject that you fell in love with. I don't believe that poverty takes away from a person's ability to think. These conversations around, well, they're hungry. Well, we're a Title I school. We give them breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, and we're about to introduce a dinner program. And then on Friday, we give them a backpack to take home to eat. And we send 100% of our graduates on to four-year colleges. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to solve problems.
This reminds me of my old performing days. Get on stage and the mic doesn't work. I don't know where to start, so let me just start here to tell you why I'm here. And I think briefly to understand why I'm here is to kind of understand my roots. I grew up in the segregated South, North Carolina, in the tobacco and the cotton fields of North Carolina. And at that time it was segregated, but I learned very early that my way out of poverty, and I was in poverty. Some of you might be a little too young to understand or remember welfare cheese and all of that. We had it. My mother had a third grade education, my father fifth. And I learned early on that my way out of poverty was education. And the only difference between me and some of my siblings right now in terms of where we are financially or economically in life is I went to school and got a college education and they didn't. And so I learned early on the value of a college education. How I ended up where I am today, because many of you probably know I was a former union president of the Washington Teachers Union when Michelle was there. And some of you might remember some of the battles that we have. And so someone asked the question, well, how did you change sides? And it wasn't a matter of changing sides. It was a matter of growing and to look at my actions and the things that I was supporting at that point as a union president. What effect did those things have on children? And if I can just share an experience with you, what helped move me one day. I was speaking at an elementary school. It was a third grade promotional exercise. And one of the things that, kids would ask you is, what do you do as a union president? And I said, well, I, number one, fight to make sure that your teachers have the kind of resources that they need in order to give you a good education. And then I said, and also make sure you got the best teachers. And so surprisingly, when I got ready to leave, this little girl, she just came up and just hugged me, right? And children can give you love in a way that they know. They know real love and they know when it's a fake love, right? So this little girl hugged me, and so I want to know, well, what did I do to get a hug, really? And she said, because you said you care about us and you make sure we get the best teachers. And so on the way back to the office, I just had this, as Oprah called it, this aha moment, right? And it's like, you know what? You lied to that little girl. You don't really care about whether or not she has the best teachers, because you just spent $10,000 in arbitration as a union president to put a bad teacher right back in her class, a teacher that I wouldn't let get near my grandchild, right? And so it made me begin to realize, well, who am I? Am I the union president that I'm not concerned about kids, but I go around talking like I'm concerned about kids, but I'm doing damage to kids? Or I'm going to be the person who says kids are important, especially those minority kids that are coming from where I came, poor, and a lot of times folks saying because you're in poverty, some kind of way you can't be as smart as somebody else, and they lower the standards. Or am I going to take away from those kids the same opportunity that I had? And I decided, no, I'm going to be real, and even if it means not following the union line. And when you want to talk about controversial things, one of the things I did as a union president was dealt with the staple of unionism. And that's seniority, right? So I'm probably one of the, if not only, the few presidents who said it was time to get rid of seniority. And the reason is that, look, I can't say to that little girl, because I was fighting seniority at that time too. I couldn't say to that little girl, I want to make sure you got the best teacher in front of you. But then say, but if we got to let teachers go, the only criteria we're going to use is how long you've been teaching. Some kind of way, if I'm going to make sure you got the best teachers in front of you, then the teacher's performance has to be more than how long you've been teaching. Otherwise, there's no way I can say I'm going to make sure you got the best teachers. And so it became easy for me. Am I going to be someone that's just taking an ideology and keep promoting it, even though I see it hurting children and will never allow the best teachers to be in front of the children? Or am I going to just take the path that I believe is important? Because I just left Birmingham, the commemoration of the whole civil rights movement and et cetera. And the civil rights issue of our time is still education. Education for poor minority kids who in many cases get locked into poor performing schools and can't get a chance at life. When we're graduating 12th graders who read on the 7th and 8th grade level, that we are dooming them to a life of failure in this high-tech society of the future. So I'm here saying I'm fighting for the civil rights issue of our time, and that is education. And that many of our children today who are locked into low and poor performing schools are having their future just snatched from under them by keeping them locked into a low performing school.
So I'd say I'm here because I have been in this game for a long time, and I think that the current dynamic that exists in this country around the discussion, debate around education reform has become extraordinarily sort of polarized, almost to the point where there is no one on these extremes, where the conversation seems to be sort of batting back and forth. And so I wanted to go out to cities across the country and to answer questions from my detractors, people who, sort of don't agree with me, believe different things than me. But I wanted to have real conversations about really what our differences in opinion was, as opposed to what I think is happening now, which is people are making a lot of assumptions based on misinformation and sort of misperceptions. So I get a whole lot of stuff. You want to privatize public education. You are anti-union. You are anti-teacher. You believe that charter schools are the answer. I mean, you name, I get all this stuff all the time. You love standardized testing and believe it should be the end-all be-all. None of those statements are actually true. I think that on every single one of these topics, the answers are actually in the middle. But the conversations are not having, we're not having the conversations in the middle. We're having these conversations on these polarized extremes where, again, I think the boogeyman is there, but no real people that I know are. So I thought it would be helpful to sort of have conversations like this. I think the biggest, or maybe the biggest misconception about me, there are a lot of them, but the one I hear the most is people say, you're blaming teachers. You think that, and you are sort of pursuing an agenda that is grounded in the belief that the schools in this country are in the state that they are because of bad teachers. And actually, nothing could be further from the truth. I come from teachers. My paternal grandfather was a teacher. My maternal grandmother was a teacher. 5 of my aunts, my sister-in-law, my best friend. My entire life, I have grown up around teachers. And because of that, I have always had a tremendous respect for how difficult it is to be an effective teacher every single day. And it is because of that respect that I have for teachers that I think that teachers need to be recognized and rewarded in our society in a way that they are currently not. But I also know that not everybody can do this job. It is one of the hardest, if not the hardest job in the entire country. So if you have a pulse and you pass the criminal check in this country, a lot of school districts will stick you in the classroom. That is not close to enough. It doesn't elevate the teaching profession, and it does not give respect to how hard it is to be an effective teacher if we just say anyone can do it or that anyone should keep their job. I truly believe that there are so many effective teachers out there who are doing heroic work every day. And I also know that there are some not so effective teachers out there. And for those people, I believe that we have an obligation to try to quickly accelerate their practice so that they can become effective. But if they can't do that quickly, then we need to remove them from the classroom. And to Dr. Perry's point, I'm going to be unapologetic about that, because our children are the most important thing that we have in this country, the most important resource, dream, et cetera. We cannot afford to be in a situation where we are allowing children to languish in the classrooms of ineffective teachers year in and year out. It is not fair to them. It is not fair to our country and our future as a whole. So I'd say that my belief very strongly is that I don't think that teachers are the problem. I think that teachers are actually the solution to the problems that we have. I think that if we were able to ensure that every single child in this country were taught by a highly effective teacher every single day, that would go a very long way in making sure that we were providing children with the education they deserve.
And I've had one criticism of Michelle Rhee. Sir, I see your hand. We're going to get there. Give me a break. I've had one criticism of Michelle Rhee, because she doesn't talk of only one. She doesn't speak of what I think, knowing her, drives this fierce urgency of now. Michelle, talk about your kids. Yeah. You know, she never reveals the fact that she speaks as a parent, and for a time was the only public school superintendent with your kids in public schools.
Right. So, you know, I got a lot of criticisms when I was in DC. I still get a lot of criticism today. But it was interesting to me because when I would sort of get all these people complaining about the different things that I was doing, and I'll just give you a quick example, and it's to Ralph's point. When we put in place a new teacher evaluation system in DC, we were at the point where we were trying to decide. We already had a great pay-for-performance side of the equation locked in for teachers who were really highly effective. But we had a policy question in front of us, which was, what are we going to do with teachers who have been rated as ineffective? And there was this whole debate on my staff of, well, if a teacher is ineffective, how long should they be able to stay in the classroom? And there were many people on my staff who said, well, you know, their minimum, we have to have 3 years of professional development, we have to invest money in these folks, et cetera, et cetera. They had a very good case for it. And I think that if I was just looking at things from the system perspective, that would have made a whole lot of sense, investing in your workforce, right? But I looked at every policy decision that we made through the lens of a parent who had her 2 daughters in the public school system. And from that vantage point, I thought, well, if I'm going to agree to put an ineffective teacher into a classroom next year, then I have to be okay knowing that one of my own 2 daughters could be taught by that person. Let me just say, for the record, I would never make that decision for my kid. No one in this room would ever allow their kid to be in the classroom of somebody who was deemed as ineffective. So I thought, well, if this isn't good for my own 2 kids, and I would never make that decision for them, then who am I? I'm not going to make that decision for any other parent in this city. I'm not going to put a policy in place that I don't think is good enough for my own 2 kids. And quite frankly, I think that if, as policy makers and decision makers across this country, all of us decided to put aside the sort of partisan politics of this is a Republican thing or a Democratic thing or this or that, and just made decisions based on what we would do for our own kids, then we would have a students first agenda that I think would serve all of our children much, much better.
Okay. Sir, I saw your hand, and I promise you I'm not going to forget you, okay? I'm making this public promise, but what I wanted to do before we start, you know, the conversation, debate, is to say, look, these are 3 people, and you got to hear them and get to know them as people, and we could disagree all we want. But what gets me sometimes is the kind of the media caricature and the polarization that appears, and then we begin shouting at each other, and the conversations produce a lot of heat, but not a lot of light. And if we went around this room and took everybody's stories, I suspect that many of the stories are going to sound very much like the 3 stories we heard here. So as we have this conversation this evening, remember that they are personal stories. And I have always wanted Michelle to talk about her kids, because when she talked about her kids, and I saw it happen in this audience, you saw people nodding. And she never did that, you know, and so you never got the sense that here was a parent who was making a decision. And the media never talked about that because she never talked about it. And so you had this sort of a person with a dimension that was missing. Whether she was right or wrong, it helps to understand that she was in part a parent first. Now, there's these little gizmos and gadgets that are sitting right here. And part of what we want to do is to figure out who's in the room. So as we talk, and as you can see, if you're a K-12 educator, you're a university level educator, I love, this is my favorite category, a future or former educator, if you're an advocate, a parent, a student, and other. Now, press the button, and you know, there should have been a category saying several of the above, but press the one that most closely identifies you as you want to be identified for these purposes this evening. That's a good way to start. And while you're doing that, there's a gentleman back here who I promised to get to, and you know, the first person who raises their hand usually scares the hell out of me. You know, because I genuinely get a speech. So I'm telling you that because if you got something to say, I want you to say it. I want you to say it quickly. Okay, hit it.
I would just like to address, I have followed your career for many years, and I do respect that you are an intellectual and a businesswoman. I feel you've been somewhat disingenuous in the way that you advocate for education. I look at your funding partners, such as the Broads, the ALEC, American Legislative Executive Committee, the Heritage Foundation, people who are actively engaged in voter suppression, and yet you sit on a panel with a gentleman who's talking about the civil rights movement. Could you address some of those issues?
Okay. I'm not going. Thanks for that question, and that was a question you had before you came in the room. You put it on the floor, and I promise you get a chance to ask the question. You got a chance to ask the question.
As she gets ready to answer, I want to say that what's important about this is you've taken the time to ask people to write questions down, and what ends up happening is the people who raise their hand and jump out of line, jump in front of the people who took the time to do exactly what they were asked to do.
And I've got to have two jobs tonight.
Okay.
One, moderating my panel, and dealing with the crowd.
Let me move this along really quickly. We don't get any money from ALEC, and we don't get any money from the Heritage Foundation. So, okay, let's move on.
All right. Now, we're not. I made one promise. I'm not doing many promises. We're not getting into that. That's not going.
There's no rebuttals. That's just a fact.
Please, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. Okay?
Let him do his job.
Thank you, sir. Now, anybody didn't get a chance to write down a question. You know, I hate the damn writing down questions myself, but you need to get your questions answered, so write them down. Let's see how many of them we could get answered here tonight. And we're going to get a little more. We're going to have a little more. We're going to do this Philly style. Don't worry about it. We got you. You know, it's not going to be all written questions. Everybody got their questions written down. All the questions are being passed around someplace. Who's collecting the questions? Put them up. Let's see the questions so we can get them.
As they're collecting them, you should also know that the questions that we do not get to tonight, we will answer afterwards. So even if we don't get to your question tonight, please don't feel that they won't be answered. Today, I answered 40 questions from 2 of the other events that we did, and you'll see all of them up online. So please know that.
I'm sorry? They're kind of getting the questions. Is there another one? Okay, so there are some questions out here. Now let's do this. Let's do the second slide and let's see what's happening in terms of topics. this one, this is a question when I saw that earlier. I said, dear Lord, you're going to ask the Philly audience whether they're excited, enjoying the conversation, cautiously optimistic, skeptical, and no expectation. Now, that's like a question that's made for a Philadelphia audience, because you can say, now, where's the piece where you say you want to begin by booing Santa Claus? Now, do the best you can with that question and let us know how you begin, because what we want to know is, did this conversation here tonight help to move you a bit from where you came in? Did it generate some light, more light than heat? Are we going away thinking a little bit about the issues, maybe a little differently? And do we have a whole new set of questions we want to ask? That's really why we do this. By the way, I should introduce myself at the very beginning. I'm Ralph. I'm Ralph Smith. I was a long-term law professor at the University of Pennsylvania, so I guess I owe a whole lot of people an apology, because I was a securities regulations law professor to do it. I now work for a foundation, and we fund a lot of educational efforts, but really we work for the Casey Foundation, which is really about improving the futures of disadvantaged kids and families. And got a lot of views on all this, but this isn't a night to hear my views. So let me just ask another, I know this is not what the panel bargained for, but I want to see if anybody over here has a question they want to ask out loud. And I'm not going to answer it right now, but I want to see if you got a question over in the corner over here, because you're not volunteering, so you might actually have a question. Nobody? How about you up front? Sir, go. You got 30 seconds.
Oh, I might need more.
No, don't you take more than that, you're taking the time away from somebody else.
Dr. Perry, my school that I taught in 1970 was the same one I went to in 1953 that fed Strawberry Mansion, Richard Wright, which I'm sure you know about, Strawberry Mansion. My premise is that if you have a group of kids for 6 hours a day in a heterogeneous, self-contained classroom, I don't care what happened at home, I don't care if the parents can't read, I don't care if the kids are discipline problems, I don't care if the administration doesn't work. I do care about the colleges teaching the teachers. If you have them for 6 hours a day, you can move them up tremendously. I did it the last 7, 8 years. I'm a reading specialist, graduated from Temple University, MED program, and I was also a supervisor for the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP. I guarantee you do it right with correct learning theory, correct reading theory, which I would think a few people might know it, but probably not. If you do it right all day long in every subject, enormous progress.
You just took your 30 seconds and somebody else's, so we got one more, please.
Just give my internet number, so in case anybody's interested in hearing about this.
Your internet number?
RV3.
You mean this is an advertising space as well? God damn, go ahead.
1000 at Comcast.net.
All right, we got one more over here.
It's not a question, it's really a statement, because
Well, they've all been statements so far, so why don't you just go ahead and make it short?
No, I actually had a student from Strawberry Mansion, because I, at the time, was a counselor at Upward Bound, who actually went to Penn, got a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD from Penn, and he graduated from Strawberry Mansion approximately in 1990s. So, yes, it's true, in a lot of situations, they cannot read, but we also would like to hear about the success stories also. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's the first question. Actually, ends up being a question, and I'm glad whoever asked that question. I'm glad you've asked this question, because this was one of the questions I collected outside, and I was hoping the people who are outside would be inside. But this was one of their questions. Why doesn't Student First ask Governor Corbett for full funding of Philly School? And the background to the question is this is a very tough time in Philadelphia. Budgets have been cut severely. The school district is being forced to close schools, empty out schools, not because of quality, but really because of cost. And so there's a kind of an unease that we're focusing on teachers at a time when there's a funding crisis. So let me ask you, but I'm going to start with Michelle this time. Say something about why here, why Philadelphia, why now, and how do you take on this funding issue?
So at Students First, we actually have 3 areas that we focus on, 3 policy areas. The first is educator quality, making sure that there's a high-quality principal leading every school and a high-quality or a highly effective teacher in every classroom. The second area that we focus on is parental empowerment, so that we are empowering parents with more information and more choices, and that no family ever feels like they're trapped in a failing school without options. And the third area that we focus on is actually fiscal accountability. And what I'll say on the fiscal side of things is that it doesn't matter where you go in this country, around the sort of January, February timeline, if you go to a school board meeting, you will hear people sort of, yelling, screaming like, we need more money. And it doesn't matter literally whether you're in Jackson, Mississippi. I was in Newark, New Jersey the other day where they spend $22,000 per kid per year. And that doesn't include Mark Zuckerberg's $100 million, and they were still saying that they didn't have enough money. And I think one of the fundamental questions that you have to ask as it pertains to this money situation is, where are the dollars going? And I say this because when I went to DC, we were spending more money per pupil than almost any other urban jurisdiction in the entire nation, and the results were at the absolute bottom. We were spending $1 billion a year on public education. And what I found out when I went there was that only $403 million of that was actually going into the schools and into the classrooms. So the vast majority of the money was being spent by this bloated, dysfunctional bureaucracy. And I don't think that it made a lot of sense to put more money into that broken bureaucracy. But there was no way to really know that because there wasn't a lot of transparency about where the dollars were going and what impact they were having. And I think this is one of the challenges that we have in this country, is that over the last 2 to 3 decades in America, we have more than doubled, almost tripled the amount of money that we are spending per child on public education, and yet the results have remained flat. So if we had tripled the expenditures and our student achievement levels had tripled, then it would be very easy for us to make the case, okay, if you're going to cut our budget by 10%, here's the impact that it's going to have on student achievement. But because we have increased the expenditures so high and the results haven't changed, we've put ourselves in a tough situation as educators. So what I would say is what we've got to do, I mean, look, budget cuts suck. I had to live through them as a superintendent. You never want to be in that situation. But what I will say is that if what I would have argued in DC was, what I needed in order to fix the system is more money, I don't actually think that would have changed anything, because we would have just been pouring more money into a bad system. What we needed to do is fix the fundamentals of the system first, and then increased investment was going to have differential results because we were actually changing the policies and regulations that controlled that system. So that's why I think, I'm not here to say Governor Corbett should do X, Y, or Z, but I do think that, I know that the district needs more money. This is an opportunity for $45 million right now and $120 million a year for the next 5 years, as I understand it. So that's $600 million more dollars. And what he's asking for in exchange is to fix some of the fundamentals of the broken system that we know has been broken for a long time. I'd say, then yeah, we should do those things. Let's fix the system so we can get more money into it.
Steve, the question comes up, and this one also comes from Steve Levin. It's about charter schools. It says that charter schools are not always held to the same standards as other public schools. There's not always very much choice. Moreover, there's a question of where's the pool for drawing those teachers, and is the pool such that the teachers in charter schools are going to have less permanent connections to the kids they're teaching? So he's really sort of asking you, as to talk a little bit about what it is, or what is it that you see, why is it that you see charter schools as being part of the solution and not a contributor and an accelerant to the problem?
I think what's most important to start with is people think that I run a charter school. The school that I run is a public school, a a magnet school in Hartford, Connecticut. I work for the Board of Education, had to take the day off to come down here to spend some time with you. Trust me. So, I believe that charter schools are part of a larger solution, which is school choice. I am pro-school choice, not pro-charter. If a charter is raggedy, I want it shut down. I don't think that any child should have to participate in any academic experience that is not the very best that there is to offer. And recognize I said academic experience, not just school, because I'm open to what technology has presented us, which is access to some of the world's best teachers online. I think that the teaching profession is going into a different direction outside of the brick and mortar, and the teachers themselves becoming individuals who take their services across the world by sitting in front of a camera. And so I believe that charters are part of the solution, first because they offer up what the community has said they want, which is choice. I believe that virtually everybody wants school choice because all of us have made a choice where we're going to live, in part because of where we're going to send our child to school. And for those of us who have less options, charters are typically the first option. America has spoken, and where there are areas where school choice is an option, there's extreme participation. The best schools have waiting lists. Though we were told that if you let these parents choose, they wouldn't know which school to choose, they seem to be figuring out which school to choose because the streets are apparently talking. Somewhere at a basketball game or something, somebody says something to somebody about this school is the good school, you need to send your child there, and they have their child now languishing on a waiting list. In terms of the permanence, and this is the point I was making in part about the teachers, not just with charter schools, but schools in general, we need to open up the teaching profession to individuals who are just teachers. I don't believe that teaching is something you could be taught. I believe that an education school is a bit of an oxymoron. I believe that teachers are born. I believe it's something you're called to do. And somebody can help you hone some of your skills, like a singer can learn to sing better, but you can't learn to sing. You can learn to hold a note. And the same is true of teachers. I believe that teachers think of things in a particular way. They can, even if they don't know how to do something, if you give them 5 minutes with it and they can get a couple steps ahead of you, they can show you how to do it. And so the issue is not about charter schools taking teachers away. I think one of the reasons why we don't have as many teachers as we need is because we don't have as much access to the entire workforce of potential teachers. Alternative route to certification programs, mid-career changers, individuals who've always wanted to be teachers but for whatever reason cannot be, should be allowed to participate. Think of it this way, and this is the last thing I'll say on this. If President Obama, at the end of his term, were to decide to become a history teacher in Washington, D.C., he could not. He's not certified.
George, you know, when you sat in the hot seat, and having seen a lot of union leaders, I know that's a hot seat. So you get this question. This is Beth's question. She says, what is it going to take? What will it take to get the politics out of public education? And is that a realistic aspiration?
Boy, what a question. And let me address it this way. Whoever asked that question really is on top of it. Politics in education has been to the detriment of education. And I'll give you an example. Now, some of you know Michelle and I had some battles in D.C., right, initially. But at the same time, what happened in D.C. when Michelle came, we went from a school board to mayoral control. And for those of you who don't know the difference, is when you got a school board members are elected and they supervise the superintendent and all of that. Going to mayoral control, it just means one person has complete control. Say it again? So, when it came time to negotiate contract with Michelle, now with my previous contract negotiators, the previous superintendent, we had a school board. Talking about politics, right? So when the superintendent come to the table and you want to talk about our precious seniority and tenure, all I'd have to do at night, I'll go and call the school board members that we ran their election. And I'll say, look, your boy talking crazy. Give him a call and tell him to take it off the table. Well, at the next a day for contract negotiations, miraculously, the superintendent got it off the table. We ain't got to talk about seniority. That's politics. Because I was able to buy some school board members. Let me just be straight up. And so as a union leader, when I didn't want something at the table, I didn't have to talk to the superintendent. I just talked to the superintendent supervisor, who I helped get elected. And say, hey, your boy talking crazy, or your lady's talking crazy, get them in check. We ain't talking this stuff. And too much of that goes on when it comes to making education decisions for children. And so when you say the hot seat, let me tell you, the seat I'm in now is a lot hotter than the one I was in as a union president. The seat as a union president, as long as I followed the same union standard inbox thinking, the seat was not that hot. You want a hot seat, you start thinking outside of the union box. Now that's a hot seat. So the one I'm in now is a lot hotter, but I feel a lot better because I'm doing what's right for kids. But I think it's hard to get politics out of education. I will go and talk to different representatives, and you know what they'll say off record? You know, Parker, I agree with you, but I got an election coming up. And I need the union support, or I need somebody else's support. So all of a sudden, these people are agreeing behind closed doors that certain things need to occur. But because of their concern about their next election, they dare not speak it in public. So then what happens? Rather than do what's best for children, the politics of it causes people to do what's best for themselves, and they never service the children. I don't know how you get it out.
So I have a quick,
Ethics and what you believe.
so let me give
Sir, if you're an educator, okay, then I would imagine you wouldn't want your class run this way where somebody's disrupting throughout. We're having a conversation there. Okay?
All right, see, let me say this, just to make sure everybody...
Okay, look, Justice.
Let me finish.
This is,
Control the discussion.
Okay.
If you can't teach and hold a group discussion, you don't need to tell us how to teach.
okay, okay, now let me, just a second, everybody. Just a second, everybody.
Guys, let him do his job.
Hey, folks. Hey, sir. So you're yelling back there. That doesn't work. Sir, you raised your hand early. I respected that, and I called on you, right? You had your shot. You had your shot. Okay?
Guys.
You had your shot.
Let me say this. Listen.
Now, please,
I can tell you.
I know this is Philadelphia, but nobody hijacks my meeting. Okay? Nobody hijacks my meeting.
If it's the worst thing that you've been in, then get out. You wouldn't let the students do this.
Now, okay, sir, this is nonsense.
We're not here for your agenda.
We're here for their agenda.
Yes, sir, shut up.
That's exactly what we want.
All right,
Shut up.
all right. Hey, sir, shut the hell up.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Sometimes as educators.
Now we're back. George, you're gonna finish, then Michelle.
Yeah. I'll just finish this way. Listen, quite frankly, I've had union meetings worse than this. But let me say this. What I'm saying to you is truth, all right? I taught school 30 years, public school, mathematics. Anybody teach middle school? Is it tough? Middle school is the toughest. I taught middle school for 30 years.
Lack of credibility, no, it's ridiculous.
What I'm saying to you when you talk about trust, because trust is a big factor, and that's one of the problems with the polarization that we got today, is that people don't have trust.
You don't know.
But the first thing you got to
If you
do
knew me,
to
you wouldn't
trust
say that.
is that you got to deal with the facts as they are and not your own
You wouldn't say
facts.
that.
And so my point to you is, what we're saying up here today, one of the things that we agreed to before we did this,
You call Jerry.
is that we're going to
I'm
deal
gonna
with
say I'm
facts
using
and
community.
truth.
You call Jerry and you tell
And so
him
this is what
So
we're
I have an
gonna
idea
Phone
for
this
this. How do we get
about
politics
this,
out of
okay?
education? This is an idea.
You go tell Jerry.
I actually believe that policymakers and politicians should not be able to make decisions for other people's children that they won't accept for their own. So let me give you an example of this. When I was in D.C., we had a budget crisis, and we unfortunately had to do layoffs. And I decided that we were going to do the layoffs by quality instead of seniority, so that we could ensure that we were keeping the highest quality and most effective teachers in the classroom. So we laid off 266 teachers, and they happened to be some of the lowest performing teachers in the entire district. Politics caused one of the politicians in the city to grandstand. So he stood up and said, "I am demanding, Chancellor Reed, that you reinstate all 266 of the wrongfully terminated educators today." And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what." I said, "You have 4 children, none of whom attend the DC public schools. I said, if you agree to send one of your kids to the district and allow me to assign one of these ineffective teachers that I just fired as their teacher, then I will give that person their job back. And if you bring 2 of your kids or all 4 of your kids back, I'll bring 4 of the teachers back. You can ask all of your uncles and cousins and brothers, any family members that you will bring back. I will hire 1 ineffective teacher back for every family member that you will allow to be taught by these people." Needless to say, he did not take me up on that offer. So I am tired of public officials who are willing to subjugate other people's children to a reality that they would never accept for their own. So my thing with politicians is, you're allowed to be against vouchers or parent trigger or charter schools if you are willing to send your child to a failing school. But if you have your kids tucked up in a Tony private school or a high-performing school somewhere, then you cannot deny other parents the opportunity to do the same thing that you're doing for your kids. So I think we could take the politics out of education real quick if we made people do for other people's kids and like they're going to do for their own.
Steve, you got a comment?
The only thing I would add to that is the speed. We operate at the speed of adults, not considering that a child's life in school is not nearly as long as we think. So when we're talking in 4-year clips and 6-year clips, we're talking their entire career. And so, for instance, this year, we doubled the size of our 3rd grade class, brought in a couple teachers, and suffice it to say, it didn't work out well. Contrary to maybe what some folks think, our children, when they come into Capital Prep, which is a school we started in Hartford, they typically come in lower than the district average. And our 3rd grade came in lower than the district average. We didn't do well, suffice it to say. Not just we didn't do well as ourselves, we did poorly as even within the district, among the kids who were from Hartford. I could give each one of those teachers 2-3 more years to give it a shot. I can't get one of those kids the 3rd grade back. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I'm not just talking about what should happen for other people's kids. My sons go to my school. I wouldn't do it any other way. I don't want you coming to my house and I cook up some pork and you say, "What you gonna have?" I say, "I don't eat that mess. If I don't eat it, I ain't gonna serve it to you. If it isn't fast enough for me, it's not gonna be fast enough for you." We have to make sure the most talented teachers are in the classroom as soon as possible. 1 year is a year. And all of you who teach know that if you get a kid who had a tough experience the year before, he may have already tapped out on education, and they can only be 9 years old. And then you are held responsible for making up 2 or 3 years in 1 year. We're on your side, we're on the children's side, because we understand just because it comes home and says that the kid got an A, it doesn't mean that they necessarily learn 90% of the information. When you operate at the speed of childhood, you understand kids move faster. Their lives move faster. We have to be more purposeful. Not one of them asked to be here. But every single one of us is obligated to make sure we give them the very best education that we can conjure now, right now.
Let me come back to you, George. You know, seniority didn't just appear out of nowhere. It wasn't some sort of magical thing the unions made up. So your position, seniority, has got a lot of people thinking. Given your history, given your defense of it. And so the question that Ruth says, okay, you got me thinking about it, but what do you see as the alternative? You get rid of seniority. We don't want to go back to the good old days where it was nepotism and favoritism and politics. So I think Ruth's challenge is, can you elaborate a system that would work, that would be fair, that would improve the quality of education if you get rid of seniority?
Okay, let me start by saying this. Seniority had its purpose. Early on in education, it was very important, especially when there was a lot of bias and there was a lot of racism going on during the time that if school districts had to cut employees, and as I said, I grew up in the segregated South. And if you were an African-American teacher, and in many other cases another minority, and you had to let somebody go, you know who was going. It had nothing to do with quality, it had something to do with race or some other issue. So seniority at that time was instrumental in creating a non-biased mechanism for treating everybody the same, whether you were black, white, pink, yellow, gay, straight, or whatever. That if someone had to lose a job, then it went strictly by how long were you working there. All right, so it had its purpose because it eliminated a lot of the inherent biases and prejudices that would come into the decision-making process. We're at a new day now where there's a conflict between seniority and getting the best teachers in front of children. It's that simple. That if the teachers we put in front of our children, if the only criteria is how long you've been teaching, then we're never going to get the what? Best teachers. Now, what do you substitute it with? And that's a toughie. Let me tell you why. Because the only thing that you can substitute it with that makes sense is performance. Your performance should count more than how long you've been teaching or anything else. But you got to create a performance system. And that's where a lot of the mistrust comes in. And I understand it as a former union president. There's a lot of mistrust that if you take away the seniority, where we're doing it simply by how long you've been teaching, teachers don't trust what you're going to put in place to ensure fairness. And that's what it becomes incumbent then upon school districts and union leaders to work together to come up with evaluation systems that are fair, and that the process that is used is one that is based on performance, but fair performance. Now, that doesn't mean you totally get rid of seniority. Seniority can still count as a percentage when all other things are equal. But seniority should not be the predominant factor in deciding who stays and who goes. It should be performance. But I think the substitute has to be a performance evaluation system that is fair and effective so that you end up keeping the best teachers.
Michelle, question here from Chris, and the observation is that we have a reward system, a salary scale that takes the best teachers out of the classroom because that's where they can actually do well. So I think Chris is saying, well, wait a minute. If we're talking about keeping the best teachers in the classroom, what is it that we need to do? And I know you sort of struggled with this and thought about it, and you both sort of arm wrestled a bit about it. So talk about what we do to keep the best teachers in the classroom, and so teachers to pursue their own economic security and their own job satisfaction aren't really encouraged, incentivized, or pushed out of the classroom.
So I think there are some things in terms of compensation that we can do to keep great teachers in the classroom. I think there are some things that are non-compensation related. I think that every professional always wants to be growing, and I think that when we can give teachers who are phenomenal classroom teachers also the opportunity to grow and take on leadership positions, et cetera, while still maintaining their classroom, like, we have to be looking at things like that. So sort of professional development, I think, is one piece of that. On the compensation side, what I will say is, I talk to young teachers all the time, and, some of them will say, well, I love to teach, but I can't afford to do it anymore because my wife and I want to have a baby and, X, Y, and Z. And so we have to turn teaching into a profession where if you are a highly effective teacher, you can stay in the profession and you can make a whole lot of money. And that was the goal of the new compensation system that we put in place in Washington, D.C. I was just telling Steve about this because he said that his wife was thinking about becoming a teacher, and he said no because they don't make enough money. And I said, well, you should send her to D.C. then. I said, because in D.C. we put in place a system where teachers could essentially make double the amount of money in the new system as they were in the old system. You could be a third-year teacher, and if you were highly effective, if you were teaching in a high-need subject area and in a high-need school, you could make up to $99,000 a year in the third year. Like that's pretty good. You could, the top of the scale, you could be making $144,000 a year. That, I think, is the kind of compensation, and quite frankly, I don't even think that was enough. But what we did do was we went from being the lowest performing, or the lowest compensation school district in the region to the highest compensating school district in the region in a matter of about 5 years, because we knew that the emphasis had to be on how do we retain our most highly effective teachers. And quite frankly, if I looked at, when I got to DCPS, there were 1,000 people in the central office. And the vast majority of those people, I couldn't tell you what they were doing every day, like what value they were adding, whereas you can be very clear about what value someone is adding in the classroom. So I think we just have to shift our mindset about where we want our talent to be. And we shouldn't say, oh, well, if somebody's really talented, we want to bring them into central office, or we want to make them an assistant principal or principal, but we should assume that our best talent would actually serve us best in the classroom.
I'm going to add a little something to that. One of the things that we do is, leadership is not for everybody. And I know a lot of people become principals or assistant principals because, in part, they want up their income. And the fact is that if you're not a leader, you should not take on a leadership role, especially one that requires you to evaluate another adult, to sit her or him down and essentially tell them, I don't think you should be at our school anymore, and to put the children's interest above your connection with that adult. That's not for everybody. That's not for the faint of heart. The tears, all the stories, and I can't, You have to realize there's 120 kids who are not going to be educated, and everybody cannot do that. So, one of the best ways to, I find, to make teachers feel comfortable with being teachers still is to know them, to actually be in their classrooms enough times and spend enough time sitting and talking to them to get a sense for what their interests are, what things they're interested in exploring professionally, in some cases personally. They may tell you that they're interested in writing. For Essence Magazine, a teacher told me that one time. Now, that has nothing to do with our job, but there has to be something that we could do to make her feel like she could write more, or do something along the lines of article writing in her professional practice. I could put that in. She was a language arts teacher. So the point is that we find other leadership opportunities in the school that may not necessarily be the type that requires an evaluation. We put one teacher in a position to be, we started a primary school, and we put her as the academic dean. She did not like talking to parents like that, because that's the phone call home, your kid did X, Y, Z. She did not like that. She didn't like dealing with downtown a whole bunch, which is pretty much 90% of your job between those two things. She wanted to be in the classroom with her. We have advisors. Each teacher has to be an advisor. She wanted to be with her advisory that she had been with for 4 years. And so she tapped out. And before she did, she said, I hope you're not disappointed. Disappointed? I'm proud of you for having the courage to say, the best place for me in this school is in the classroom. That's what's best for me.
We've got another question, and actually this is a series of questions all clustered together, but John Travis, who's online, his question really goes to, given the way we compensate teachers, given the way we evaluate teachers, given the way teachers are assigned, aren't we essentially ensuring that the least prepared, the least effective teachers are going to end up in the lowest performing school and the highest need communities? And if we don't want that to happen, what is it that you propose? How do we get the kids who need the most and the best not to have the least and the worst?
I don't know that is in fact the case. First of all, if you entered education for money, you might have made the wrong decision.
Just maybe, right?
Just maybe. But on the same token, if you look, in many cases, pre-K to 12 teachers are making about what some college professors are making. And so, by comparison, it's a standard within education. But I think the notion that because somebody works in a poor school district that they're going to make less money is not, in fact, true. In Hartford, the average salary...
No, that wasn't the question that they're going to make less money. The question is, how do we... Let me just reverse it. How do we get the best and most effective teachers in the schools that need the best and most effective teachers?
So the last part of this is, I think that we need to make sure, then, that we do find ways to incentivize through some money, where possible, but understanding that we can't simply continue to throw money at the problems, because ultimately, I've yet to meet too many people, especially teachers, who are motivated by money. So we have to create an environment within which they want to work and come to. It has more to do with the love of it.
Well, I'll tell you something. I happen to have gone to lunch with Michelle Reed. By the way, she can put down a mean fried chicken. We were at B. Smith's. And when she had big money on the table, a lot of teachers were coming over saying, I hope you get that. So, we may not all be motivated by money, but money matters. Money matters in terms of compensation, and it matters in terms of school funding. George.
I want to add to that. As I said, I was a middle school teacher. And I can tell you, Steve, I didn't go into the profession for money. But I'm going to tell you, I can't remember a pay raise I ever saw some teachers that they didn't want it. Money is a motivating factor. I think that one of the myths we got to get rid of, because it's that some kind of way teachers don't care about the money. I cared about the money. I had family members I needed to support. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to have a standard of living that was just as well as the doctor and the lawyer too. Plus, middle school teachers. That's a job. The concept that you can go into a school, and our hours were 8 to 3:30, that you can be a great teacher and you can go hit the door at 8 and walk out at 3:30 is a myth. So when people look at the work that teachers have to do, trust me, because I've been a good teacher and I've been a bad teacher too now. Early on, I was the bad teacher because I said I'm working according to the contract. Contract saying got to be here until 8. I'll be here at 5 Contract say I can leave at 3:30. You want to meet with me? See you tomorrow morning at 3:35. I'm out. But as I got a little bit older and began to care about the kids a little more, then I began to I used to have this thing, I'm taking no papers home to correct. I was a math teacher, middle school teacher. But as I began to say I want to be a great teacher, all of a sudden, 3:30 was not the end of my workday. I had to take papers home, and I'm correcting papers to 9 o'clock at night. I'm coming in early in the morning. So people who looked at my 7.5-hour workday and say, well, hey, you're making pretty good money for 7.5 hours. It's like, oh no, this ain't 7.5. I be taking people work home, correcting papers, calling parents to 9 or 10 at night.
But George, let me get you right. How are we going to get the best and most effective teachers in the lowest performing schools and high need communities?
I'm going to go back to money. Now, one of the things Michelle and I did in DC in implementing the pay for performance, if you taught in a low performance school, you could pick up an extra $5,000, all right? If you taught in a high needs area, because when you're talking special education and mathematics and some of those other areas, you could pick up, some additional money. But I believe you got to incentivize folks, because here's what we have. There is no incentive for great teachers to move into the low performance schools, because often they got the worst principals, they got the worst resources, and something we don't talk about a lot, which we're going to have to start talking about to make schools a lot better, discipline. They got the worst discipline sometimes. So your great teachers say, I don't want to go over there. So you got to have an incentive, and I can tell you, I think money is one. I think number two is to allow those teachers to have the same kind of environment. Because, see, I'm not one who believes you can take a teacher, because teacher was great at school A, right? School A, great parental involvement, got a great principal. Instead of the principal marking what time you come in, the principal wants to find out what can I do to help. That you just because that teacher is great in school A, I'm not one to believe you can just take that teacher, pull them out of school A, put them over in a low performing district in school B, and all of a sudden they'd be successful. Because they may have less resources, they may have a principal who's a nut, all other kind of things that can all of a sudden make it impossible for that teacher to succeed. So in addition to money, that if you want great teachers to go to low performing schools, make sure that you got great leaders in those schools as well. So money and leadership and resources are three things that can be an incentive.
Michelle, you get a chance to add anything you need to add to that question.
I was just going to say what George said at the end, which is, compensation is one thing, but for a lot of teachers, it's about leadership. And in DC, we had a lot of just really bad principals. The principals who, they would sort of, give these edicts. You must put up a data wall in your room, and the associate superintendent is coming for a visit tomorrow, and so your data wall needs to be up. And I'd have a teacher say, well, I actually keep data for my kids in these folders, in these binders. I feel like it's more effective. Do you still need me to put a board up? Because that would actually inhibit my ability to plan for tomorrow. And the principal would just say, well, you have to do it because that's what 825, that was the central office told you to. If you don't have an instructional leader who can engage with their teachers in a meaningful way to answer very logical questions in a way that's going to make sense to that, then you're just, I feel like you're an absolute discredit to the reforms that are trying to take place. And so to the extent you have ineffective leaders, you are creating an environment where effective teachers would never want to stay or go.
And that goes to principal training. See, Steve's a great principal. He's a great school leader. What happens is that we don't train our principals to be leaders. We train them to be supervisors. And there's a difference. And so we can begin by looking at principals and start looking at how we train principals. That teachers don't need someone to put a little red check when they come in late. That's not principalship. They need folks who can lead, who can look at what do you need as a teacher to help me to make you the very best teacher you can be with our children. And that has to come from principal training. That principals see themselves as coaches, as leaders, instead of supervisors.
I'm going to ask our panelists to make closing comments, but remember they've said they're going to answer every question. But I'm going to ask 4 people, before they make their closing comment, what's the question you would have wanted to hear asked and answered? Now, that's not an invitation to a speech. Can I get an amen on that? Okay, that's not an invitation to a speech. And just give us a question you would have wanted to hear asked and answered. I'm going to start with the gentleman back there, and we're going to work our way around the room. And if you take 15 seconds, I can add one more. Good.
I think what's important. I'm sorry. I think what's important in terms of questioning is like, how do we parse out what's an effective teacher? And I don't think that's been really parsed out in the discussion, because if an effective teacher is clearly someone who has like high test scores, then what's going to happen is teachers start gaming the system. We have cheating, like we had cheating in Philly, we had cheating in DC. And so how do we parse out really what's an effective teacher?
And sir, you are a good example. You, sir.
My question was, I think everybody agrees that we should get ineffective principals and effective teachers outside, out of the classrooms. Completely agree with that. But that has to operate off the assumption that there's a store of teachers who are effective, motivated, and who will be successful with students. How do we make sure that there is that arsenal of teachers ready to take over after we have that gap when we get rid of ineffective teachers?
You must have been in the car right over here.
Okay, woman sitting right there, and then I'm coming back to you. Yeah, you please.
I guess I'm also a parent of 3 children. I teach in a rural county, and my children go to school in a rural county. I guess more as a parent, what is it you recommend that we do to really push these reforms? Because I'm finding it hard to address the school board. I'm finding it hard to get parents involved. My children have ineffective teachers. I work with a teacher who sleeps. He was high the other day. He got escorted out. Why does he still have his job? Why are we still making the same? What, as a parent, can we do?
Okay, you made the mark. Good. And we have your question here.
Thank you. For those of us who are interested in being really on the forefront of education reform, what message are we missing? Because there are so many stereotypes or misunderstandings. What message are we missing in empowering communities to be on board with this? Because so many communities are not on board, which means there's something wrong with the message that we're giving. So how can we fix that?
Ralph, can we just, I know you're doing...
No, you can get, we're going to take 2 more. We're going to take 2 more, one here and one here, and then it's all on the panel.
I'm sure everyone went over to the U.S. Department of Ed earlier in the year. It was in regards to the Journey for Justice event, and it was showing how a lot of the urban districts have been attacked in the public education system due to the educational reform. What is your take on how Camden City School System is taken over by the Abbott School District, how the Philadelphia School District has been taken over, how a lot of the school districts in the southern as well as on the West Coast is happening in all of the urban cities. So that question in regards to empowerment, I find that a lot of the changes and the reforms have been dictatorships, really, from the mayor or from the city or from the governor, and that needs to change so that parents feel more empowered.
Thanks so much. And young man, you get the last question, and then the panel gets a closing statement.
Right, thank you. I write for a group called Students for Education Forum. We're a national education advocacy group. And as college students, we're struggling to move the conversation from one of rhetoric to one of actual values. And in that struggle, what specific policy can college students advocate for, and how can we be a part of this movement?
I'm going to ask the 3 panelists to make short closing statements.
Ralph, you are breaking my heart,
in the order they were introduced.
Just so when you guys walk out of here, you know I was fussing at him to try and get this to be longer. All right, first to your question about effective teachers, I don't think that we can ever look at absolutes in terms of test performance, and I don't think any one of us feels that way at all. I think it has to be a factor, but not the factor. There are other methods that we can use to determine teacher effectiveness, and Danielson has a method that we're using in Connecticut, and I know that I think you guys are using it down here, and I actually think it's pretty good. Nothing is going to be perfect, and everything is going to be required that a person looks at it, but I think that's a great place. But I do think we do need to use some standard form of measure. Here's where I differ with the way in which it's done now. I don't think that the state standardized test should be taken all at once in 1 month. I think it should be broken out over time, because our school is a year-round school. We got the test results this year in August. Even our school system had started school by that time. So the data is for all intents and purposes useless. So I think we need to find data. We need to be able to harvest the data better and be able to add that to the evaluation. Again, had we had the data, we wouldn't have even known certain teachers would have been evaluated differently based upon that. What we should also always look at is growth, not just absolute performance, but growth. We want to see how far a teacher can take this group of students. That's important too. Normalized over the course of the school. How does this relate to the rest of the school? Where does this person fall in the percentile in terms of performance? So that is the best I could do in the little bit of time I have. You're right. So one of the biggest issues that I find, really, you must have been in the car right over. We were just talking about one of the reasons why we've struggled to extend the number of schools that we have, which is right now we have 2 in one building, an upper and a lower, is because we interview at least 15 to 20 per position. That's after reading through as many as 60 resumes to get down to that number, then to have them come in and poop the bed on the interview. And everybody's got a hot 45 minutes in.
That's a technical term.
That's right. That is a technical term. Everybody's got a hot 45 minutes of a lecture that they can do in class. So if you can't do that, then so you're right. And so that's the thing what do? We can't just usher them out all the time. But then how long do we leave them? It's a real tough question that when I look in the eyes of the families that have entrusted me with their children, I struggle with, because I just lost a year in 1 year, and now I'm freaking out because I don't know what we're going to do, because I can't extend the day but so much, and we're already extended the year, so we're hit with a whole group of kids right now. So there's that. And then, Mom, your question is the question. What do you do? So we hit you with all this information. He's like, okay, where are we going? What are we going to do? And I think where you have to go is you can organize the parents in precise ways. And what I mean by that is, believe it or not, superintendents read emails. And you flood their email box with a number of parents, they're going to hear you. You don't even have to get up out of your chair to impact policies. So whatever the specific issues are that you think are most important, you guys, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it can be 4 or 5 moms and dads or whatever, who come straight to him or her. That is one way to make the impact felt when you do that. The other thing is, I think that there needs to be a parent representative at the table when the contract negotiations occur. They're there, but the parents are not there. There needs to be literally a parent representative at the table at the time negotiations occur, because you can go down to the Board of Education meeting and act an entire fool, but all the decisions are made. All the substantive decisions are made. So there's that. And then to both of the students, here's where I think you become so important, and I really mean this. On a macro level and a micro level, what's really going on in education, because you're still a consumer, and you're a consumer on multiple levels. And what's important about that is that either you or your friends had to come to college and take an 009 or 007 or some kind of class that you had to pay for but got no credit for. And that should not occur if you graduated from a high school. You should be college ready. And so there are a number of issues for which you can fight, but I believe, quite frankly, the one that you need to fight for most is school choice. Because you got a choice to go to a particular college. Other kids should get a choice to go to the schools that are best for them, that fit them. There's some schools that are art schools that a kid would go to and she or he would feel amazing there. They would just love every day. Other kids, it's a traditional high school. Still other kids, it's a Montessori school. There are so many different ways to be taught and learn that we cannot allow the brain research that we know to be true to be thrown by the wayside. I believe you fight for school choice because the other side, quite frankly, is fighting for what I believe to be racist policies. When you allow a group of children to be cordoned off into an ineffective school system, euphemistically called urban, but usually of color, and one group is always at the bottom of that, poor and black, then we start to see that these policies have an uneven impact on minority communities and very often black people and Latino people.
30 seconds.
Yep.
I was about to call him Dr. Perry. You know, when you go interrupt the doctor, you don't have to.
Right. I was going to do the same thing to you. So, doctor. So, where you guys fit in is identifying an issue that you can move the pin on. And I believe that you can move the pin on school choice because at the end, here's the bottom line. Education reform has already occurred. All those people have been fighting it, they lost. Vouchers, charters, magnets, school choice, even tax credits, all in play. They already lost. Parents have spoken, they made it very clear. We want to be able to decide where our children go to school. We know there needs to be accountability. All these things are already in play. The question is now how they will manifest themselves in the operation. You guys, students in particular, my heart is set on school choice. You focus on school choice, and you will help so many more children join you on campus.
George.
I was caught up with what Steve was saying. I'm going to make it short. I guess I'll start by saying this. This battle is one that we all have to fight. Education of our children. And I started out by saying this is a civil rights issue, and that we all have a stake in this. We all have a stake in what kind of future our children and grandchildren are going to have. And that future is going to be directly impacted not only by what your particular family member achieves in terms of education, but it's going to be impacted by what other children, the minority children that we may not see every day, the quality of life my grandchild, your children is going to have, is going to be impacted by that. So we all have a stake in this. Secondly, it ain't easy. This is not easy. Ed reform is not easy, but it is necessary. Because even the people, and trust me, I've been there. I've been against everything people want to do. I've been against charter schools. As a union president, when they forced charter schools on us, I wanted to just scream. Because it wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't. But then I also got to tell you, my opposition to charter schools as a union president didn't have nothing to do with the children. It had to do that you were getting more teachers who couldn't be union members. I'm just being straight up. Because charter school teachers are ununionized. And so if you're taking kids from my public school and sending them to a charter, that means there are less teachers needed in the public school, more teachers in charters, and I got less union members. All right? So some of that's in play in this too. I just want to let you know that some of that's in play. All right? But that this is a battle for all of us. Now, how many teachers we got in here? Oh my God, good. I want to teach from my teacher now in peace. And want to say this to you. This is your battle. The one missing piece in this whole ed reform piece is the voice of teachers. And let me tell you why. It's because you're not talking. I hear teachers all the time to say, well, nobody hears me. Okay. You can't hear a voice that is silent. Teachers, and I can tell you, I taught 30 years. And one of the things I used to say to my principal and say to the superintendent, there is nobody that you know that can tell you what I need in Mr. Parker's 7th grade algebra class the way Mr. Parker can tell you. As a teacher, I can tell you what I need to achieve the success you are either asking or demanding that I achieve with these students. The problem is, teachers, you are silent and you're letting everybody else who doesn't know what little Keyshawn, Khadidra, and all of your other little kids in your class need. So they're guessing. But you who see them every day and know the resources you need, you know what you need to be successful, but you're silent. You got to get involved and let your voices be heard. Now, I'm going to say this to you. I was a union president. I didn't say let the union president's voice be heard. I said your teacher voice be heard. You got to get involved because you know what your kids need because you see them every day other than the parent. But nobody's going to give it to you when you don't ask for it. Other people are going to guess. So I say to the many teachers who are here, you can't close that classroom door and say, the rest of the world doesn't matter. All I care about are that, and we're secondary teachers in middle school, and I always refer to middle school. Well, I'm just concerned about the 80 to 120 kids I teach. You can't do that and really make the system better. You got to do what you got to do inside the classroom, but you are the doctor. Look, if your doctors writing prescriptions without knowing who the patient is are dangerous people, aren't they? Right? Well, you are the doctor when it comes to the students in your class. You know what they need. But you got other people writing prescriptions because you won't write any, because you don't go out and tell people what they need. So I challenge the teachers, get involved. You can't just close your door and say that's all it's required of me. It's required that you be an advocate for all children. And also say to you, that old union slogan, and I used to preach it too, it's not your job what the teacher next door is doing. Well, yes it is. You can't sit back any longer and see Mr. Parker next door reading the paper and giving worksheets to his students all day and not teaching, and then say, that ain't my problem. It is your problem because it affects your profession and it affects your school because Mr. Parker passing in there, Mr. Parker sitting down giving his students worksheets when the assessment comes around is not going to say you were the great teachers, your school is bad.
All right, Reverend Parker.
All right, so teachers get
Reverend Parker.
involved.
All right.
You got a wealth of knowledge that reformers need.
So we had
Get involved.
We had Dr. Perry, we have Reverend Parker, Leader Parker, and we ended with Chancellor Ray.
So I think my colleagues both did a good job of trying to answer as many of the questions as possible. I'm going to end on your question, though. You said, what are we missing in terms of messaging, right? Because the bottom line is that the things that we are talking about, there's a group of people who think that what we're trying to do is evil and nefarious. We're not going to be able to ever talk those people into sort of understand. But there's a middle group of people who don't really know what to think about education reform, not really sure. They hear both sides, and those are the people that we could potentially win over. And I think that the problem with that group is fear and trust. So it is much easier to fight against something than to make something happen proactively, right? So the opposition will say things like, you're funded by the voter suppression groups. That's like, I don't like voter suppression. I don't like you. Well, they're trying to privatize public education. I like public education. I don't like anybody who's trying to privatize it. They want to evaluate teachers solely on the basis of test scores. Well, I'm not a very good test taker. I wouldn't want that to happen, right? So they use a lot of these sort of tactics and messages that are very easy to understand, right? I didn't have to explain any of those things to you. They're scary, right? They're trying to take your schools away from you, that sort of thing. So it scares the bejesus out of people, and they're very effective. And so the only way to counter that is by building trust. We can't have a counter slogan that's going to somehow make people feel equally as it's about building trust over time. And it's about having real conversations. And that's what we were trying to spark here, not believing that we were going to sort of end all the myths or answer everybody's questions, but I'm going to give you a quick example. Let's take the example of they want to evaluate teachers solely on the basis of test scores. Raise your hand if you're a teacher and you've heard that sort of contention, right? They want to evaluate you totally on the basis of test scores, right? The bottom line is that if you take me as an example, and students first, we think it's important for student growth, academic growth, to be part of a teacher's evaluation. We don't think it should be the only part. We think that there should be observations of classroom practice and contributions to school community. So there are lots of things that we believe should go into a teacher's evaluation. But we believe that student academic growth Controlling for the factors that are outside of the purview of the teacher should count for 50% of a teacher's evaluation. In Connecticut and some other cities and states across the country, the teachers union have signed on to teacher evaluation systems where student growth counts for 35% of the evaluation. Okay, so is that what we're talking about? A difference of 15%? Because if that's what we're talking about, then let's have the conversation about the 15%. Right? Because I can tell you at 50%, I can't tell you that 50% is absolutely it. 35% might be right. 42.7% might be right. I don't know. So if you think it's 35 and I think it's 50, then let's come up with a reasonable course of action from here. Let's choose 30 cities across the country. Let's have 10 of them implement 50%. Let's have 10 of them implement 35%. Let's have 10 of them implement 42.5%. Let's track it over a 3-year period and see what the outcomes are. And if the 35% cities do better, then I'm going to be all about 35%. That is getting us to a better place. Arguing about things that aren't true, that I want to fire all the teachers and evaluate some of this test scores, which is not true, that's not going to move the agenda forward at all. So what we have to do is begin to build trust, number one, and to have real substantive conversations too, instead of buying into all the sort of rhetoric that's going back and forth, because that doesn't help the debate.
At the beginning of the evening, I said I wanted you to get to know these three people. I think that they have helped a lot. They haven't taken us really close to where we need to be, but I think they've raised up some good questions. I think that here in Pennsylvania, where we have tax credits, where we have charter schools, where we've got teachers' unions who care deeply about education. One time I said that, look, if teachers' unions were the problem, we'd have great education in Mississippi. And last I checked, not there. So it means that we got some real complicated issues that we can probably do better about when we're not shouting at each other. And I want to thank you for the patience, the cooperation tonight, and the willingness to listen. And I want to thank our 3 panelists for being here.